What's breaking the middle class? Most Americans are doing what they were told to do. They work long hours. They earn more than their grandparents did. And yet they feel stressed, broke, and one emergency away from disaster. Which is the exact opposite of what the American dream was supposed to deliver. Work hard, and you'd get stability, a home, a car, a family, and a decent life. But today, even middle-class households lie awake worrying about mortgage payments, job security, healthcare costs, and debt. So, what actually broke the American middle class? It's not laziness. It's not bad decisions. And it's not a lack of effort. The real reason is more uncomfortable than that. The middle class was never guaranteed. It was built under very specific conditions, and those conditions quietly disappeared. And once you see how the rules changed, you can't unsee it. To understand why the middle class feels so unstable today, we first need to understand that it wasn't a natural outcome of capitalism. It was built deliberately, under conditions that no longer exist. The middle class was engineered, not natural. The size of the American middle class was the result of deliberate economic conditions. And by the mid-20th century, the United States had one of the largest middle classes in the world. This wasn't accidental. It was industrialization, which accelerated in the US from the late 1800s into the early 1900s and transformed the entire economy. Factories, railroads, banks, and large corporations expanded rapidly. These systems didn't just need manual labor. They needed managers, clerks, engineers, teachers, accountants, and administrators, roles that paid regular wages and offered stability. This group became what we now call the middle class. Not yet at scale. The middle class didn't become the backbone of America until the post-war boom stacked the deck in its favor. For roughly 3 decades after World War II, several conditions aligned at the same time. That timing wasn't normal or guaranteed. Factories produced goods at massive scale, enough that refrigerators, washing machines, and cars became ordinary purchases, not luxuries. As production increased, everyday costs fell. Groceries took a smaller share of income. Clothes were affordable on a single paycheck. That wasn't about luxury, it was about margin. Even major purchases didn't require decades of debt. At the same time, productivity gains were shared with workers. When output rose, wages rose too. Because higher wages and higher production moved together, price increases didn't outrun incomes. As a result, inflation, the rise in everyday costs, stayed relatively stable. Because everyday goods were cheaper while wages were growing, one income was often enough to support a household. That same income could qualify for a mortgage without consuming most of the budget. But that stability didn't hold on its own. It worked because institutions kept families from falling backward. Public education widened access to middle-class careers. And if someone lost a job or got sick, unemployment support and job protections bought families time. So a setback didn't become a collapse. And most people don't realize how rare that was. That version of the economy only existed for a brief moment, but we built our expectations around it. Over time, however, those conditions changed. At first, nothing seemed wrong. Productivity continued to rise, but wage growth slowed and eventually stopped keeping pace. At the same time, housing, healthcare, and education costs increased much faster than incomes. Social protections weakened, shifting more risk onto households. Today, the national average individual income in the U.S. is about $62,000, and median household income is roughly $75,000 to $83,000. Yet to afford what many people still think of as a middle-class life, stable housing, healthcare, raising children, saving for retirement, basic transportation, modest vacations, and the ability to absorb a financial shock, households often need to earn well over $100,000 a year, and in many areas significantly more. Faced with this gap, households adapted. Instead of one income supporting a family, most households now rely on 2 full-time earners to reach what used to be considered a middle-class standard of living. The expectations stayed the same, but the economic structure that once supported them changed. Because one job rarely keeps up with rising costs, many workers now protect their income by switching jobs every few years or stacking skills that let them move into higher-paying roles within the same field. But this isn't about ambition. It's about keeping income aligned with costs in a system where loyalty alone no longer pays. But even with better roles and higher pay, many incomes still couldn't keep up with rising costs. So households used the only lever left to close the gap between earnings and expectations: borrowing. Subscribe for more videos like this. Debt replaced income as the glue holding life together. For most of American history, income, not debt, is what held everyday life together. But the way people paid for daily expenses began to change. And that's the part most people miss. It started in the 1950s with the launch of the first modern credit card by Diners Club. It was designed for restaurants and travel, occasional expenses, not everyday survival. It didn't stay that way. In 1958, American Express and Bank of America followed, expanding credit beyond elites and into the middle class. What changed wasn't how people bought homes, it was how they paid for ordinary life. And once that shifted, everything else followed. Credit cards made spending frictionless. No waiting for paychecks. No immediate limits beyond the card's balance. For banks and retailers, this solved a problem. When wage growth slowed, credit allowed spending to continue anyway. Consumption stayed high, profits stayed strong, even as incomes fell behind costs. Over time, this logic spread everywhere. Education shifted from being paid up front to being financed with student loans. Cars moved from one-time purchases to long-term monthly payments. Groceries, healthcare bills, and emergencies increasingly went on credit. Debt stopped being a bridge to opportunity and became a substitute for income. Middle-class households could still look successful: a home, a car, a degree, but those symbols were now held together by monthly payments. In practice, that makes continuous income a requirement, not a bonus. Miss a paycheck, lose a job, face a medical bill, and the entire structure becomes unstable at once. Debt didn't just support the middle class. It became the system that kept it functioning despite wages no longer doing the job. Because debt makes households fragile, many people now focus on limiting how much they rely on it. When income stops but bills keep coming, households need cash to stay afloat until paychecks resume. So, some people build emergency savings to absorb unexpected costs before they turn into long-term debt. Other people add a side income, freelancing, contract work, or small projects to reduce dependence on a single paycheck. These steps don't eliminate risk, but they help prevent one disruption from turning into a financial spiral. So the question isn't just how households borrow or save, it's who ends up owning the system that collects those payments. The system rewards ownership, not work. In the United States, the economy rewards ownership more reliably than labor. And that one fact explains more about inequality than most debates ever do. In fact, wealth is heavily concentrated at the top. Here's what that looks like in practice. The top 10% of households own roughly 2/3 of all wealth, while the bottom half owns very little. This gap isn't mainly about how hard people work. It's about how money is earned. This is where the difference really starts. Most middle-class households rely almost entirely on wages. Wages are taxed immediately, before the money ever reaches a bank account. But wealthy households earn much of their money through ownership: stocks, businesses, real estate, and other assets. That income is often taxed at lower rates than wages, and sometimes not taxed at all until assets are sold. In simple terms, the system treats these two sources of income very differently. Work is taxed every paycheck, and ownership is taxed later, and often less. When middle-class households borrow for homes, cars, education, or emergencies, they pay interest. That interest becomes income for banks, investors, and asset owners. And this is the part most people never see. When households borrow and pay interest, money flows upward, from people who rely on paychecks to people who already own assets. But leverage works very differently depending on who you are. Large firms with market power can keep prices high even when their costs fall. Households don't have the same leverage. They cannot negotiate rent, healthcare prices, or interest rates in the same way. This doesn't mean the system punishes work. It means it rewards ownership more than effort. That's why middle-class families often spend on depreciating assets, cars, upgrades, lifestyle expenses, while wealthier households focus on assets that tend to grow in value over time. This single difference compounds over decades. One group makes monthly payments. The other collects them. That difference, not effort or intelligence, is what steadily widens the gap. And once you see this divide, it changes how you interpret almost every financial decision people make. People aren't just spending or investing, they're trying to change which side of the equation they're on. That's why many aim to invest long-term in diversified assets like stocks, real estate, or gold, not to get rich quick, but to reduce dependence on any single source of income. Diversification matters because different assets face different risks. When wages stagnate, investments may still grow. When one market underperforms, another market may hold value. Others try to move toward ownership by starting businesses within their profession. Lawyers opening law firms, pharmacists opening pharmacies, not because it's easy, but because ownership changes how income flows. Instead of only earning wages, they participate in profits. But diversification doesn't eliminate all risks. It limits how much damage any one failure can cause. So ownership can rewrite the math for an individual. But when the system is broken for wage earners, it feels like a personal failure, even when it isn't. So the American middle class isn't breaking because people stopped working hard. It's breaking because the math changed. Over the past few decades, productivity kept rising, but real wages largely stalled. Housing costs have grown more than twice as fast as incomes. Healthcare spending per person has more than tripled since the 1980s. And today, the top 10% owns roughly 2/3 of all U.S. wealth, while most households live paycheck to paycheck. So stability became expensive, debt became normal, and ownership, not effort, became the real divider. That's why so many people feel like they're doing everything right and still falling behind. Understanding this isn't about blame or pessimism. It's about clarity. Clarity is what lets you stop playing a game that no longer pays and start choosing moves that actually protect you. Because once you see that the rules changed, you stop judging yourself by standards that no longer match reality, and you start making decisions based on how the system actually works now, not how it worked for your parents. The goal isn't to beat the system overnight. It's to stop being surprised by it. And that awareness is the difference between constantly feeling behind and navigating the system on purpose. Once you understand this, the goal isn't to feel smarter. It's to stop blaming yourself for a system you didn't design. And as economist Joseph Stiglitz put it, the rules of the economy have been rewritten in ways that advantage capital over labor.